All right, thanks everybody for joining us tonight for Vicki Peterson. My staff in Bismarck is going to talk to us about so, so supplemental security income and that transition into adulthood. We usually have this as part of a bigger um, presentation that Vicki does, but we've been breaking up some of that just so that we can hit different pieces of it and everybody can benefit. The slides will be sent out to you tomorrow along with the recording. And then if you have friends or family that wanted to look at it too, we will put it up on our website as well. So without further ado, even though it says Deneen on her screen up there, um, Vicki is our staff in Bismarck, and she is a wealth of knowledge, and we certainly appreciate everything that she does for families and for us as an organization. So go ahead, Vicki.
All right. Yeah, it says Janine, but I always have a problem changing that, renaming it. So again, my name is Vicki Peterson. I live in Bismarck. I have two boys. My youngest son, who's not a child anymore, he's an adult. He's 22, going to be 23. He is on the autism spectrum disorder and has intellectual disabilities and chronic health. And so that's kind of my history. I started with Family Voices many years ago when my son was in early intervention. And so tonight I'm going to be talking about supplemental security income, which is referred to as SSI. So throughout my speaking and the PowerPoint, SSI is what we're talking about, supplemental security income. Let's see if I can. There we go. So hopefully by the end of this presentation, you'll have met some of the learning objectives that I have through this, which is the first one is just to understand the basic knowledge of SSI, and it's your specific situation or turning or has turned 18, to be able to navigate how to apply or to help someone apply. And to understand how SSI dollars can be used, and then to gain some knowledge on appeal guidelines as well, if that is something that you would have to experience. So I will stop my presentation after so many slides and ask for questions. So if you have questions, if you want to write them down, then I'll pause and we can get to your questions so I don't go too far ahead. And so it's not at the end of the presentation where you're trying to remember a question you had. Okay, so what is SSI? So SSI is a means-tested program. So means-tested means a person's income and or assets that provide cash payments to someone who's disabled, or at least we're talking disabled or special need children, disabled adults, or individuals age 65 and older. SSI benefits are not based on your prior work or family's prior work history. So those are called SSDI or Social Security Disability Insurance. So that is not what we're talking about tonight. I can do another presentation on what SSDI is and what that would mean for someone. But tonight we're solely talking about SSI, except I do have one slide at the end that kind of compares the two programs. So SSI benefits are paid out to low income, low assets, okay, for an individual or a couple. There's no age limit on SSI benefits. And one thing you want to keep in mind, if you have heard some things about SSI, supplemental security income, maybe from other states, or you have relatives that live in other states, they may say, well, if they receive SSI, they're automatically enrolled in Medicaid. That is true in a lot of states, but it is not true in North Dakota. In North Dakota, receiving SSI benefits does not guarantee that you will receive Medicaid. Now, a lot of them do, but it is not a guarantee. North Dakota is what we call a 209B state. So you have to apply for Medicaid through the North Dakota Medicaid program. It is not part of the application when you apply for SSI. Okay, so it is a little more restrictive than the SSI program. Okay, one of the things we're going to talk about first too is you might hear some things depending on your situation. Somebody might have talked to you about compassionate allowances. So a compassionate allowance is a way quickly to identify diseases and other medical conditions defined that meet the Social Security standards for disability benefits. So these conditions primarily include certain cancers, adult brain disorders, a number of rare disorders also that affect children. This CAL, which is the Compassionate Allowance List initiative, helps reduce waiting time to reach a disability determination for individuals with more serious disabilities. Now, the important part of that is to reach a disability determination. That does not guarantee you the dollar benefit, okay? It does, however, guarantee you that the person or child or adult, that they have a disability that meets the criteria of the Social Security standards. The SSA uses the software to automatically identify these applications that meet that criteria, and they flag them for a priority processing, which is basically, it's not going to take you as long as if you'd have to go through normal channels to find out if Social Security has determined the person who we're discussing a disability. The SSA can make quick decisions on these applications, which could be decided in days instead of months. So on the bottom is the website that you can go to if you want to look at where the compassionate allowances are, their conditions. Okay, so eligibility. So eligibility for SSI is for people age 65 or older, blind or disabled. They have limited income and resources. Okay, so next slides, I'll describe what those income and resources may look like. But for an individual, they cannot have more than 2,000, and for a couple, cannot have more than 3,000. You must be a U.S. citizen or a national, or a non-citizen in one of the alien classifications by the Department of Homeland Security. You have to be a resident of one of the 50 states, DC, or the Northern Mariana Islands. You cannot be confined to an institution at the government's expense. And you may have to have certain other requirements depending on a circumstance, but those would be completely individual circumstances. They're not ones that I've come across since I've been working with Family Voices and doing SSI, but I do know from colleagues in other states that those can exist. So tonight we're focusing a lot on that turning the 18 of age, that transition age. That's a key point during that transition from pediatric to adult care. Turning 18, one of the things that we look at a lot or should be looking at is the qualifications for SSI, whether that would meet the person who's turning 18 or just has turned 18, if they would become eligible. But I will want to tell you that the door doesn't close at age 18, okay? It's just this, as Deneen said, this is part of another training that I do. It's a transition training. So a lot of times then we're talking about age 18. So when a child turns age 18, then only an individual's income and resources are count when we're determining that SSI. So we know that in SSI, you have to have low income, low assets. So if you were applying as a child, they're going to count parents' income and assets. They do a different type of what we call deeming. In other words, things that they may consider as income from a parent, some things they may disconsider, or waive that doesn't count as income. But tonight we're focusing more on the adult transition. You're considered disabled if you have a medical determination of physical or mental impairment that can include emotional or learning problems that result in the inability to do substantial gainful activity. can be expected to result in death, or has lasted or can be expected to last for a continuous period of not less than 12 months. So on the bottom of the page, again, another website. If you go to that, you will see the adult listings that Social Security deems as being disabled. Okay, some of them are quite medical. They're divided up into groups. But if you always had questions about that, more than likely you could talk to either your child's pediatrician, because maybe they're not seeing a family practice doctor by that time, or a general practitioner. But filling out the application, that's the first thing that Social Security will do, is to decide whether that person is disabled or not according to their standards. Okay, so we talked about limited income. So what is that limited income? So in 2024, on average, a person cannot earn more than $1,550 per month. And a blind person, there's different criteria for, up to 2,590. And for couples, that would be 2,915. Okay. So those are what we call on average. Okay. So they may be less than that. It is a pretty good sign that that would be limited income. More than that is not a very good sign, because as you go below here, you can see the very few things that are not counted as income, which is the first $20 they earn or have each month. I should say the first 20 is what they have each month. The next would be the first $65 of their earnings. So that's earned income of any kind. If they receive SNAP benefits, that does not count as income. If they get an income tax refund for some reason, that is not counted. Earnings for students, that could be scholarships and stuff, they do not count as income for SSI. If they're having LIHEAP benefits, LIHEAP is fuel assistance in North Dakota, but it's actually a federal program. And then funds that are already in an ABLE account do not count as income, though you cannot hide funds in these. And then if they're on housing assistance also does not count as income. So what would be limited resources? Well, things that you can have. You can have cash on hand, but again, we want to make sure it's below the $2,000. You can have bank accounts, again, has to be below the $2,000. US savings bonds, stocks, mutual funds, kind of the same thing, land, life insurance, personal property, and other items that you own that could be changed to cash. All those things are going to count as resources if you have them. So, excuse me. So one thing that my son had was US savings bonds. And he got those when he was quite little. And we did not qualify for SSI for him as a child. We didn't meet the eligibility criteria. He was considered disabled, but we didn't meet the limited income or the limited resources. Okay. So I knew before he turned 18 that I would have to do something with those US savings bonds. Okay. Either cash them out. And of course, if you have a US savings bond, they're not really full potential until 30 years. So you got way less money. There isn't a whole lot else you can do with the savings bonds. And so we did end up cashing them out, but you do have to know that you have to do that quite early on. The Social Security will go back at least 7 years to see if you have cashed in any bonds. And of course, those are tracked by the US government. So, it's something that you want to think about early. Other things that we think about, just kind of getting everything in order for that 2000 if you know somebody who's going to soon be 18 and that you might be applying for SSI that could help them out as a benefit program. So basically anything you can change into cash. Now, this goes again into a larger part of my training, and you most certainly can contact us and we would do more trainings, or if you would like a full transition training in your area, you know, it is something that we can think about. But those are the things that you're going to want to think about. And part of that training is looking at able accounts and special needs trust of where you can have money that would not affect a person on SSI. Okay, some resources that don't count. You can live in a home and it doesn't count depending on where you live, and the land that is on it does not count. You can have one vehicle regardless of the value of that vehicle. Household goods and personal items, you know, I put the example like wedding rings, you know, they don't count as a resource. There's plenty of other things. Life insurance policies that have a face value of $1,500 or less. Burial spaces and burial funds, again, at $1,500 or less. Property that you use for self-support. So I run into this every once in a while with some people, they might own a business. So they like, I use the one that I helped out with. They own a gas station, but that didn't count as a resource, okay? Able account funds established after you met the eligibility of up to $100,000. So I know you might be asking me what able accounts, that's a whole nother bigger training, but an able account, basically, I'll give you just a brief overview, is an account that you can establish for someone who is disabled if they were disabled before the age of 26. It is a tax-free account. A lot of people could relate to it if you know what college save accounts are. It's the same type of tax treatment that would get for that. And if you have an able account and you put money in there, you can have up to $100,000 that would not count as a resource or an asset for SSI, okay? Grant scholarships to pay for, like I said, those educational expenses. Some people, maybe they're not on Medicaid, they might have private insurance. So what you have money in a health flexibility account, those FSAs do not count. And then of course, if you have resources in a special needs trust that's been set up for the person who is disabled. Okay, so I'm going to stop right here. And if anybody had any questions, you can, I don't know, vocalize them, raise your hand. I'm not too formal, or if you put them in the chat, and you might be able, I can probably try to pick them up too.
I have a quick question. Do you recommend that they set up an ABLE account before they apply for SSI?
Not necessarily. The reason why I say that is because some people sometimes feel like, okay, if I have this money and he's earned this money, then I can just put it in an ABLE account and then they won't count it. But you have to meet all the eligibility criteria of supplemental security income, no matter what, whether you have an ABLE account or do not, okay? So as long as you're setting up an ABLE account where you're not trying to hide anything, to say, look, he has this savings account over here and he's got $5,000 in it. So instead I'm going to open an ABLE account and put it in the ABLE account so that when I apply for SSI in the next 2 months, we don't have that money. SSI can actually go back and see when you did that. And for them, that might be considered a reason for denial, a reason for hiding money because you didn't actually meet the eligibility, okay? Now, some of my families open up ABLE accounts. I did for my son when he was very young, when they first came out, which was 10 years, over just about 10 years ago, because we're celebrating the 10-year anniversary of it. They don't go back for that. So even though I think it depends on your situation, I wouldn't get caught hiding the money because it actually isn't Social Security that is the lead agency for ABLE accounts, is the IRS, and there is a penalty for that, okay? Besides the fact you could be denied that SSI disability benefit. Now, I have had people do that, a couple years in advance and have an able account and then apply for SSI. They were found fine. They put on their application that they have the able account, and the Social Security Administration approved it. So whether to open ahead of time or afterwards, I am not a legal expert, so I can't, give one way or another. I would look at the situation that you're in. If you know someone is going to meet that income and low asset level, but you just want to start the opening of an ABLE account, certainly you can open it before. When you fill out a supplemental security application, they will ask you for all accounts. You will have to disclose to them that you have an ABLE account. You will also have to disclose the statement. So they will know when you opened it.
So do they go back 7 years on bank records too?
They can. I can't tell you if they would.
Okay.
They have the right to, though.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Vicky, I have a question. You mentioned that life insurance was one of the things. If we have, say, a firm life insurance on him, like I pay for it through my employer, would that or wouldn't that account towards a resource, I guess, is what I'm asking.
So the life insurance is payable out to him?
No, it's on him, payable out to me.
That
So
would
if
not.
something okay. And like on our personal life insurance, we just updated that. The beneficiary on that would go through, it goes to actually to our estate, which within that we have a special needs trust set up. So it would never go directly to Austin. It would have to go through these other steps.
Correct. So having that special needs trust protects you.
Okay, perfect. I just wanted to make sure.
Yep.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else? Okay, and I mean, I'll stop again so we can think about them. And at the end of the presentation, you will have my contact number. And a lot of times there's things that are just so specific to your family's needs, so sometimes an overall question doesn't help. I'm more than happy to help anybody one-on-one as well, okay?
I had a question. I was trying to get off mute though.
That's fine, go ahead.
Does child support affect it at all?
Child support, well, it would depend. I mean, if you were applying for SSI for a child and they're getting child support does count as income. Typically, not always, just depending on the situation for child support at age 18, they would no longer be receiving it. So there would be no record of child support. It might be in a bank account and could count if you kept it for them as an asset. If that was the case, I would contact me and we'd help you get ABLE accounts set up for that because that would protect that money. As a child, it counts as income though.
Oh, because yeah, he'll get it till he graduates or if he goes to that after, I don't know what they call that after graduation program till he's 21.
Like life education?
Yeah, probably.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you could give me a call and we could kind of take a look at where things are at to see if an ABLE account would help in that situation. But at 18, if he applied for SSI, they would look at whatever is in his accounts. Okay.
All right.
So if he's getting a payment of child support and it puts him over an income eligibility for SSI, then of course he would not get the benefits. But remember, it can be up to $2,000.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
All right. I was just curious.
Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. Come on. It freezes. Oh, I hate that. All right. I went too far, but okay. Applying for SSI. I really didn't go too far. Okay, so you're going to apply for SSI. Here's are some of the documents that you need and that if you got ahead of time to have on hand, it's going to save you some time. So one, of course, would be a social security card, or at least the number. A lot of people I help, they're like, I can't remember where my card is, Vicki. And that's fine. You can always request a new card, but if you have the social security number, that will do. You need either a birth certificate, a naturalization certificate, or US passport. You need proof of income, both earned and unearned income. So like a tax return, any pay stubs, any award letters, any of those things you would need proof of. Bank statements, if you have CDs, they're going to ask you for those statements. Bonds, they ask you for. Able account statements, if you already have an able account open. Insurance policies, they will ask you that question. You must provide them with an insurance policy. Vehicle registrations, they ask for not all the time, because I was never asked that for my child, but he was probably deemed disabled because he wasn't driving either. So that was asked for me in an interview. It wasn't actually asked when we started the process online. If you have a special needs trust already established, you will need to send them a copy of that. They have their own attorneys in Washington, D.C. that take a look at those special needs trusts. I can tell you most people who have to enter their special needs trust, it does take a little bit longer for the determination of SSI benefits that I've found for everyone I've helped. Because the special needs trust is very legal, very specific rules, very specific wording in it. Medical sources, so like if you have physicians' names, hospital providers, medical services, addresses, phone numbers, if you have those, it does make the process go much quicker. If you don't, Social Security will help you get a copy of medical records if you need that. So if you're on here and you're young and you got some years before you think you might be doing that, that's something to keep track of. We actually have a care notebook that we could get to you that could help with that. But nowadays people have my charts, which is kind of nice because you have a lot of information in there. If you did work, you have to have work history, the name and type of works, descriptions, IEPs they will ask for. Some students, my student did what they call the CBD class in high school. And he got paid for it, which was really small amounts that he could use like in the school store. But there are taxes that were taken out of that. So we had to report all of that income as well. So just some little things that come up that you wouldn't think you would need information on. The application itself, you can start by applying online. There are a few people that can't apply online, but it'll kick you out right away and tell you must just make the phone call and apply with an appointment. But there's the website that you can follow. And when you go to that website and you start applying, if you're not on this and looking at applying for a child, you just check the 18 and older box and it'll start taking you through that application. There is also a check mark, again, if you're applying for a child. You can call this number and make an appointment. Either way that you do this, they will do a phone review with you, okay? So some people, I just called and did it all in one shot, but other people will apply online. Either way works. You can make an appointment in person. It's difficult to get those ever since COVID. Here, it depends on which office you're going to too, since I'm talking to people all over the state. Bismarck's office does do a few of them, but typically they prefer without an appointment. As we're talking about transition process, so apply as soon as possible at age 18. We'll get that process going sooner, okay? And remember, if we're applying and thinking about transition age, we're not applying at age 17 because they're going to take the parent's income and assets for part of that, okay? It's only after someone turns 18 that they look at that individuals, okay? Foster care youth may apply and accept applications 180 days before foster care eligibility ends. So they get a little bit of a leniency there if you're caring for foster care children. You can apply before the age of 18. You can receive help from a Social Security or a representative. So Social Security do have people that can help you, or you can have a representative. Sometimes I help people apply, and I can put my name down as a representative. I don't have to put my name down as a professional. It's just someone helping you, okay? A family member can help you. Notification of whether you qualify for the benefit or not can vary. The average right now is 3 to 5 months. The 3 months are the pretty simple ones where there is no checking really need to be involved and the disability is very clear. I would say more are waiting 5 to 6 months. I waited a whole year, but my son turned 18 during COVID. So that was a very difficult time for them to get back. We also had a special needs trust, and I repeatedly got letters saying that it will be taking 30 days more, 60 days more, because we're still going through the special needs trust. Some people who apply get denied right away, especially on the first time. Typical reasons that you would get denied right away is one, of course, is an incomplete application. Disability conditions is the biggest one. So when you apply, it is Social Security determining that disability. It is not a medical doctor, okay, as to speak. It's Social Security Administration. They have a very set rules. So the more information you have about your young adults disability, the better off you'll be, okay? Those good hospital records, those medical records, if they had therapies, if, those types of information will completely help probably not being denied the first time. Is it unusual to be denied the first time? Not really. It happens quite often. And it usually is due to disability. So once they determine this, you may get a letter that will say, we found this person not to be disabled by Social Security Administration standards. Okay, so what can you do from then? And we'll talk about those things, but you can either stop it completely and reapply, but make sure when you're reapplying, you have more information than you had the first time around, okay? Or you can appeal that, which means you can add information to them, okay? Those are the two things you can. Like I say, a lot of applicants are denied at least once, and then ultimately they are approved. And they're approved because there's more information that is getting to them, okay? And then, of course, there always is the denial if there's too much income, resources, or the assets. So what can you do in appeals process? So appeals process goes for both the eligibility and then any claim you may have after that, okay? So the process is through SSI, you can appeal them all. You must do them within a 60-day time period. So if you are denied eligibility for SSI and they say it's because this person is not disabled, you can file an appeal. It must be within those 60 days. There is always a page that comes with it that talks to you about how you file an appeal, okay? So at that time, if you're thinking doing an appeals process, again, like I said, review the file, find out more information, you can talk. I mean, I've gone with families when they gone and back and talked to their physician. Maybe the disability is not described correctly, or maybe they didn't put down how they were determined to have this. As that's happened with autism spectrum disorders, they weren't diagnosed by a gold standard like the ADOS, or standards that came before that. Those things can help with an appeals process because once you enter that information, then they're taking a look at that. Do not file for an appeal and then reapply at the same time. If you do, they'll go back to the original application dates, and then all those monthly benefits could be lost, okay? So people said, well, then why would I reapply? Well, I think it comes down to how you filled out that application in the first place. If you think you have given them almost all of the information that you possibly can, you still believe your young adult is disabled by their criteria, I would say appeal. If you had so much information you never entered and gave to them, you might decide to reapply, okay? But again, you could not reapply within that 60-day time period either. They take the same time period as appeals process. Most families I know, it'll be at least 6 months because they're gathering more medical information that may be needed to be determined disabled. The sequence of appeals, I mean, the first one is a pretty easy one. It's reconsideration. So they review those files, and they review those files with a different SSA representative. So you have certain people that'll call you, you'll get a SSA representative that works with your case. If you're appealing, all that information goes over to a different representative out of Social Security Administration, and they take a look at it. If they feel a reconsideration needs and that this person truly is disabled, or if you're filing for a claim, they believe they should be paying out for that claim, it will be, that process will go pretty quickly. If not, it can go and the reconsideration happens and still that other SSA representative feels the way the first one did, then it can go to a hearing before an administrative law judge. The next process would be an appeals council. And if you appeal from that, you go to federal district court. You can see the sequence of appeals could take a long period of time if you ever ended up in the federal district court. And I'm going to say we know of one case in North Dakota. I could be wrong because that was a long time ago, but not a lot of people get to the federal district court because it could take 10 years easily. So that's the appeals process. So I'll stop for questions again. It can be on anything we've talked about or question you have that we haven't really talked about.
So for the medical records piece, do you give them like the names of all of the doctors, or do you actually gather the medical records and send them in?
So I mean, you could do them either way. You can submit medical records if you have them, okay? And you can just give them the names and they go with them. It depends kind of, on the situation itself. I mean, my son saw a lot of medical doctors when he was young, and I did not have all the records. I had some. I had to go back because my son was in early intervention, and honestly, I started working for Family Voices, and somebody told me you should keep record of all that stuff, so I had a lot of stuff. If it wasn't the records itself, I had the name of the physician and where it was located. Now, a lot of times these physicians have moved. They don't work anymore. They retired. It could be a lot of things, but those records typically stayed there or were accessible. Nowadays, when you have electronic records, it's a lot different. At that time, people weren't using electronic records. We didn't have my charts or everything. So there could be a lot of things associated in a my chart. So it's kind of, you can submit both, but having as much medical information, at least the name and address and where they were located and probably the year you saw them, just makes the process go faster.
Thanks. Yeah, I was just curious. I especially early
What about
on
for
got all the
theories?
records. I have binders full of records. I can't imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, then you're probably in pretty good shape when you have all that, because sometimes they don't. During a phone interview, that Social Security Administration representative will ask you and tell you what they want. Okay. And so sometimes with mine, it was like, just give us the name. We're fine if we don't have the medical record. We just want to have the name. Okay. Then I give them the name. But then on other things, I had to have them send me large envelopes so that I could mail them the information. So at that time, you're going to know what they want. If you have them all on hand, it's just that much quicker and easier to get it done. So if I was your case and I had all that information, I'd have that pertinent information out when I'm on the phone interview for sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And somebody else had a question, I know.
I had one question going back to
Sure.
CDs again.
Sure.
So about a year ago, we cashed in one of his CDs. And we used the money to buy a washing machine. Because he has so much issues with incontinence and we literally wore out our washing machine. Are we
Okay.
going to get dinged for cashing out his CD to use it for something like that?
Did you cash it out before he was 18?
Yes.
You're fine.
Okay.
To them, that CD does not exist anymore.
Okay. I just didn't know because if they look back, 2 years from now, it's going to show up on a bank statement.
Correct, but it's not showing up on his bank statement now. Okay. That becomes more into play if you apply for SSI and he still owns that CD.
Okay. No, it's cashed out.
It's cashed out.
Okay.
So the most they would ask you is, did you have a, savings bond, a CD bond for him? You would have to answer yes. Okay. But as long as, if there's nothing in his accounts, the washer isn't his, I assume.
No, not technically, I guess.
Not technically, no. So,
Okay.
can they ask you the questions? Yes. And you don't want to lie. It's worse to lie.
He has another CD yet, but we did cash one of his out, within like the last year and a half.
Okay, so the best thing you can do is if you have CDs and you're thinking that, this person is going to be applying for SSI or you're going to be helping them apply for SSI, is to either get an ABLE account or a special needs trust. That's probably the only way you can protect a lot of things. Okay, so I don't know how much a CD would be in that. But a CD, once it's paid out, counts as income. So that's something you need to know.
Okay.
And it also is the CD in his name under his Social Security number.
The one that we cashed out, yes, it was.
Okay. If a CD is not in their name and not their Social Security number, it's not their asset.
Okay.
If your child, if a child received, let's say, an inheritance, a sum of money from, let's say, a grandpa or grandma that had passed away, how is that looked at, and is that part of the earlier requirements for assets, I guess?
Yes, if they receive an inheritance, it's counted as a resource. If it's income, it's income. So it will take them off of that SSI benefit. They will not receive the benefit, the amount of money. It doesn't change their determination of being disabled. It changes what benefit they collect from it. So this is also part of my larger training. If you expect inheritance of large sums of money, probably the best thing is a special needs trust, because that can accept any amount of money. It can accept land, it can accept minerals, and those types of things. ABLE accounts are good for that, except that ABLE accounts, they protect that money, and something could be deposited in an ABLE account as an inheritance check, but you can only deposit so much per year. Currently, it is at $18,000 per year for a deposit. So if somebody got a $30,000 inheritance, what are you going to do with the rest of the money? It's going to count as income. So not only does that count as income for SSI, that can count as money for Medicaid and other means tested programs.
So if you already have a special needs trust established for your child, and you know that, let's say, a grandparent is going to leave an inheritance at some point for the child, you would instruct them to designate the child's special needs trust to place that money in that, correct?
Correct. It is secure then, okay, because that child does not own that. The special needs trust does. And that's not to say that you shouldn't have ABLE accounts either. I will do a presentation on ABLE accounts too. I'm a big person that feels like if you are disabled and you qualify for an ABLE account, which is pretty easily, you have to be disabled before the age of 26 and have a disability that Social Security defines as disability, you qualify. You don't have to receive the benefit of SSI to qualify. You just have to be disabled. And it can save you in all kinds of things because it's a way to protect your other programs for you. So, and we're going to talk a little bit about that moving forward.
Do you happen to know, with a special needs trust, can you change the owner of the trust without closing it out and starting over?
It depends on what kind of trust you have, if it's a first party trust or a third party trust. Most special needs trusts are irrevocable. But a third party trust, which means someone else has contributed the money or the land or whatever into this trust, it can be, certain things can change in that trust as long as the trustor, and it's trustor, TRSTOR, has the ability to like invest it different or whatever. But other than that, if that trustor is gone or no longer on there, that trust becomes irrevocable and you cannot change anything. And that's about as far as I know. If I had that as a bigger question, I would contact an attorney or someone, if you already have the trust, to talk to those people. Because I'm not a legal counsel. I'm telling you what I was told when we opened our special needs trust, which was a third party trust. Someone else established that for my son.
Yeah, that's what I was I thought that's what we were told when we opened it, but I was just curious if you had heard the same thing.
Yes.
Just one thing we want to verify. I'm pretty sure you answered this question already, but I just want to make sure we understood. If your child, let's say they have a little job, starting when they're 16 years old, then they actually receive a paycheck for Social Security. For this benefit, they could go back to the time they started earning a paycheck, or is it just for that current year when you apply?
Well, they have a right to go back 7 years. Do they actually do that? Not necessarily. And again, even if he's earned a paycheck, so that earned income. Okay, let's say the earned income was so low that you never paid taxes on it. You know, you can earn so much money, you never pay taxes. There's not a record there. Did they take out Social Security income tax? You know, those things. Like I said, you know, my son started working at the school when he was in ninth grade. He had these little jobs and they'd pay him, but he was still below the income level. Okay. As long as you're below the income level doesn't mean you can't have earned income. Doesn't mean while you're on SSI, you can't have a job. Because remember, there's certain things they take out. They don't count the first $20 and they don't count the next 65 and then they don't count the next half of something else. So some of that income doesn't count. So depending on a person's situation, as long as they're meeting that income level of 2,000 or less, they're good. Okay. Because that's what they're looking at. So if he had income 3 years ago and it was that year he had an income of $2,100, you're not going to get dinged. If you have a large income, that's when you're going to get dinged. Or if you're trying to hide things. Okay. And when I say hide things, you know, what's Social Security Administration representatives have told me is that, you know, we don't like it, Vicki, when we ask them, do you have any CDs? And they say no. And then we're doing all of our stuff and all of a sudden pops up at 5 months and they say they had a CD. Okay. And it was cashed a year ago. Well, they could have just told us they had a CD and cashed years ago. To them, that is what they consider hiding. Okay. So as long as you try to do your best on everything, I think Social Security Administration works with you on that, or they can tell you on those things. What I can tell you, because I don't work for Social Security, I'm not an attorney, I can tell you that you want to keep it somewhere, you know, on that 2,000 or on that level. So if my child was 16 and I knew he had hundreds of dollars of bonds, okay, I would have done something about that at that time at 16. If you do something about that at 17 and a half years old, you're probably going to get dinged because they think you're trying to hide the money. I don't know if that makes sense to you. It's kind of a tricky situation. And some of these I can't answer completely because I think they need legal advice.
If we have a special needs trust that's in process, is it better to just wait to have that done?
Well, it depends again on the situation, you know, like where are you at with your special needs? If you apply for SSI and the special needs trust isn't completely set up, when they ask you, they're going to ask you that it's in process. You're going to have to send that to them when you're done with it. And so it could probably delay benefits. Typically, a special needs trust shouldn't take a long time to set up. I don't know how long you've been working with it, and it would depend on your attorney because it depends on how busy they are.
Yeah, so it's fairly on the downside where it's completed. So you're basically advising them to have it done.
I'm advising that special needs trust can protect a lot of things.
Okay.
And so if you're in the process of it and it's almost done, I would wait to apply for SSI when it's done. So you have the copy, they have it. You don't have to wait till it's completely done and then try to send it in. I think there's some steps that could be avoided if you did it after it was done, because you will have the copy on hand and you can send them a copy.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So one more question about ABLE accounts. When you say that those could be viewed,
Oh,
is there a look back at?
I guess you're cutting in and out, so I'm not hearing you very well, Eric.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you
That's
hear me
okay.
better now?
Yes.
So for the ABLE account, you said that those could be viewed as sometimes trying to hide money. But they look at if you're, is there a certain threshold? I mean, because you said there's only a limit of what, $18,000 a year. So if you're putting substantially less dollars into that over the course of, let's say, a few years, if your child's already 14, let's say, is that still potentially a red flag if you're to open
No,
something like that up now?
no, no, it's not. So the hiding of an ABLE account is typically, so, I mean, somebody asked me in the beginning, it does depend on the situation because if if a person opening an ABLE account right at the age of 18 meets all the other criteria, there's nothing to hide in an ABLE account. Okay. If that person, when they ask for like employment history and stuff like that, and they find out they worked all this, and all of a sudden, boom, they realize they could put in an ABLE account and won't count for money, that might ding them. Okay. So there's a trick to it. Either you wait to open an ABLE account after you apply for SSI, that could be a safe choice, or you open ABLE accounts as early as you possibly can. Because remember, you don't have to receive the benefit of SSI dollars per month to qualify for an ABLE account. But an ABLE account protects, and we'll talk about it as we move forward, what you could do with that per month. So remember, when I'm using the word hiding, I'm using the definition that Social Security Administration had given to me, which is basically like, don't hide things from us. If you have that, okay, if you had a bond or if you have an ABLE account, don't tell us you don't have an ABLE account because they have the right to look at that statement, okay? ABLE accounts, their lead agency is the IRS. So the IRS knows about it. So these are lead government agencies, so they have a lot of back and forth. They can find all that out by Social Security numbers. So as long as you're truthful about things, you're good, okay? And as long as you're like, oh, okay, let's see, I'm going to apply for SSI. And it takes about 6 months maybe to get the approval. So right now I'm going to cash out $5,000 worth of bonds. They might ding you. What they do after they ding you is not for me to answer because I do not know. It would be different for everyone. But Social Security Administration will tell you, you must meet all eligibility, okay, to meet the eligibility for SSI, disregarding any other accounts like an ABLE account or anything. So you still have to meet that criteria. So even if you have money in an ABLE account, okay, you still cannot be over that $2,000 as an individual a month. And what happens when you are is you get a deduction in your benefit. And they don't always catch up with you right away. So if they don't catch up with you right away, you may have spent that money. And then you owe the money. That's happened to me and my son, or for my son, several times. And he doesn't have a job. They either overpaid or underpaid. So that's a common thing that families will call me about because it's just common for Social Security to do that. I don't know if that helped you much, Eric, but if your child is 14 and it would qualify for an ABLE account, I would open an ABLE account. And if you
That
need
is
help
helpful.
with,
Thank you. Yeah.
yep, and if you need help with that, I will help you with that. Okay. So how much SSI could I receive per month? Okay. So in 2024, the federal benefit rate, the highest amount you can receive is $943 for an individual and $1,415 for a couple. There are some states that you may live in that supplement. That means they give extra for SSI recipients. North Dakota is not one of them. Wish it was, but it is not. Because as you can look at, $943 would not survive for a person per month these days. In 2025, the federal benefit rate is scheduled to go up to $967 for an individual and $1,450 for a couple. SSI checks are usually paid on the first of the month. We're going to talk about it, but living arrangements can affect on how much one will receive per month for SSI dollars, and also the income may affect that amount. Okay, so we're going to talk about living arrangements. I probably get more calls on living arrangements than anything else. And again, remember, I'm doing this as an overall, not a specific situation. So if you are in your own place, or you have a house, or you rent, or you're paying all of your rent or mortgage and utilities, there's usually no deduction in the monthly rate for SSI. Okay? But if you're living in another person's house or apartment and you pay less than your share for housing and utility costs, there's usually a deduction. So in my son's case, he lives with me. We own my home, so he's not paying me rent. He does pay a portion of his utility costs, but that's it. So we have a deduction. That deduction is called in kind. Okay, I'm going to flip back over to the other side of this slide and talk to you about starting in September 30th of 2024, the Social Security Administration no longer count food as in-kind support. So when my son received SSI, this law was not into place. So they counted food as well. So I had about a third of his SSI benefit reduced as to in-kind. So it was a lower amount. Okay. If you're in a public or medical facility and Medicaid is paying more than half the costs, your SSI dollars are reduced to $30. I do not see that changing. I haven't seen anything that comes out that it changed, but it possibly could. If you're homeless, you can receive up to the maximum benefit while living in a shelter for up to 6 months. Monthly payments will not be reduced if an individual spends more than a third of it on income and housing. So how does that last one work? Monthly payments will not be reduced if the individual spends more than a third of their income on housing. So you could establish with Social Security Administration, if you're receiving SSI benefits, that person is using those benefits to pay for part of the mortgage on your home by establishing a rental lease. When you first apply for SSI, and I tried it, and then I found out it didn't work, is I had a rental lease agreement with my son, so he would pay for part of that at the time. I needed to establish that for a good 9 months to a year, and then SSA would consider it. So they do not accept that rental agreement if they're living with you in your private home right away. They can accept it later, but they're going to ask where some of that money would be coming from, okay? So when my son was on SSI, after a year, I proved that he paid his portion of utility costs in the house. And then I presented those to SSA, and I did get an increase in his SSI. Okay, it wasn't a very large increase. And at that time, they would take food into consideration too. They no longer can do that. Okay, and there is a lot of talk about this in-kind changing. This is the latest I'd received from Social Security Administration when I put some phone calls in and asked them these questions. So things can change in the future. SSI will typically, the monthly benefits will always change with increase of COLA, or, the cost of living, they'll go up. Maybe governments will choose to really higher the limit on them. So it's good to keep up to date on those things. I try to keep up to date, so I'm always encouraging people, you know, if they have the question, they surely can give me a call and I will try to find out the answer. So living arrangements can affect how much that monthly payment will be. So can income. So doesn't say you can't work when you're receiving SSI payments. So for every $2 you earn from work over the 2,000 limit, and besides those deductions we talked in the first place, the $20 and then the $65 is reduced about $1. Okay. And remember, the first 65 of each month is not counted for earned income. So for every dollar you receive of unearned income, the source says SSI is reduced for $1. Okay. Beneficiaries can use ABLE accounts, potentially preserving their SSI benefits. So what does that mean? So when you have an ABLE account established, and let's say the person was receiving here in 2024, the $943 maximum benefit. Okay, when you have SSI money, it goes into account and you can't have more than 2,000. So you can't just let it sit there and build up because you'll be over the limit of $2,000. So SSI is used for your basic needs. And so you have to spend down SSI dollars. You should be spending them down every month. Okay. So you could spend them off on food, or if you are paying rent, you'd be spending them off on rent, you know, clothing, those types of things. So let's say we have $300 left over. Well, I know I'm going to receive my next SSI benefit pretty soon and all those things. And so I have to keep spending down this money. Well, you could transfer it, that $300 into an ABLE account, and it won't count as income for SSI. Okay. You could have $100,000 in an ABLE account before SSI payments. They're suspended until you spend down. That's a lot of money. I mean, in my position, it's a lot of money, $100,000. So when my son, we already had the ABLE account before he applied for SSI, because he was like 12 when I opened the ABLE account, 12 or 13, I can't remember. But so I would use the SSI money for his basic needs. We'd buy some clothing, his hygiene products, whatever he needed for that. And then why shouldn't I be able to, save money just like anybody else who's disabled, right? The rest of us can save money. Why can't disabled people? Well, because they rely on means-tested programs for so many things. Well, the ABLE account allows you to save money for them. In fact, up to $100,000 before SSI would be suspended. Okay. So that's one of the big benefits of having an ABLE account, okay, is being able to save just like anybody else. And again, you'll all be notified. I will do a big presentation on ABLE accounts soon as well. I usually do at least one a year. But in the meantime, if you had questions for him at the end of this, you'll have my contact information and we can discuss ABLE accounts. I really feel it's one of the best programs we have for persons who are disabled. It was passed in Congress by both houses. I mean, both Democrats and Republicans. They all felt this was a good program for people with disabilities to be able to save just like anyone else. So there are some caveats to it as well, just like anything else, but it is definitely worth talking about. So how do you use SSI dollars? So do they keep track of what you use for SSI dollars? Not necessarily, but the Social Security Administration can audit you at any time for your SSI dollars. My example is my own situation. So I told you my son applied for SSI and it was during COVID. It took a whole year for us to get determined that he did qualify for SSI. Okay, so after that year, they go back to the application date. So you get this huge check because it goes back that far. They usually split it up in threes, but we got like a check of $5,000. So my first question was, well, I have to spend this $5,000 right away, or can I just put this in my ABLE account? Well, I can't directly put it in my ABLE account, but we put it in his SSI account. But they don't count that $5,000. They give you a large leeway. It will be in your letter when you receive that of how many months you get to spend that down. So we spent a little bit of it down, and then we put the rest in the ABLE account. Is that legal? Yes, it is. Okay. But other things you can use your SSI dollars on: food, rent, clothing, medicine, dental care, personal care items, spending money, utilities. Okay. Always remember to keep those assets in mind, cannot be over the 2,000. And spend down needs to occur, or at least to have an ABLE account to save money. Okay. Before, it always used to be just spend down money. Now you have a couple of options. Okay. So you can use these. One thing you want to remember when we're talking about SSI is we were talking about resources and assets. So I do keep a comment. Oh, we bought like this $3,000 gaming system with his SSI money. That now became an asset. Okay. So can Social Security go back to take a look at that? They can, especially if they audit you. Okay. My son was audited 3 times very quickly, one right after the other. Does that happen to everyone? No. Can it happen at any time? Yes. Okay. And you do have to produce everything that they ask you for. The one thing that we have come up with that you don't have to do is you have to produce an ABLE account statement. An ABLE account statement looks like a bank statement. And they can ask you for that because they can look at that limit, okay? They're looking at that for $100,000 because they have the right then to suspend it. But you don't have to give them a total list of what you spent it on because they are not the lead agency. IRS is. If IRS feels you spent it on things that were not fitting into that program, the IRS can audit you and you would pay a penalty to them, not Social Security. So you can also have a representative payee. So I am my son's representative payee. He has an intellectual disability, so I chose to be the payee. It can be a person or an organization, and what a representative payee does is manage the SSI benefits. So their duties are to use the benefits for the beneficiary's current needs. They report any changes to the Social Security Administration. They should be the ones keeping the records. An individual cannot be paid by benefits to be a representative payee. In other words, they cannot take that beneficiary's monthly benefit and pay themselves unless it is authorized by Social Security Administration. Certain agencies, though, can get paid to be the representative payee. A payee, a couple things they can't do. They can't sign legal documents. And again, I said they can't use the beneficiary's money for their own expense. Representative payee comes along with the Social Security application of how the information they need to do that. I'm going to talk very quickly about the differences of SSI and SSDI. We've kind of went over what the SSI, because that's what we've been talking about, but a lot of people get them confused. So SSDI is a Social Security disability insurance. That eligibility is based on disability work history or family members' work history. Like my son is no longer on SSI. He is on SSDI because my ex-husband retired. So he gets retirement benefits. The benefit amount average is usually a little higher. It's, the average right now is about $1,537. It comes from FICA taxes. And then the difference is most SSI recipients, not all, keep in mind, we're a 209B state, but most receive Medicaid. When you're on SSDI, you may qualify for Medicaid after a 2-year waiting period. And that comes into play when we think about SSI, is that dual eligibility. Currently, my son is dual eligibility because he receives SSDI under retirement benefits, so he's also on Medicare. So he has Medicare and Medicaid both. That's a dual eligibility. There's just a little bit about that in there in case you had questions. And then if you gave me a call, I can direct you in the right resource area to get information about that. So here we have other questions I'll take at the end of this PowerPoint, and which all of you will receive this PowerPoint. There's some resources, websites that you can do, and there is my information. Again, you'll receive this PowerPoint, so you can contact me directly at that 258 number, or you can also contact through Family Voices, our main office in Edgeley, through Janine at that 888 number. Either one will work. We have different staff throughout different regions, so if it wasn't directly me, it would be one of our staff that know how to answer that question too, or can try to help you with that question. So we're kind of right at that time, but does anybody have any burning questions that they would like? And again, you know, I am offering this to you folks as well. You know, if it's a specific situation, you surely can contact me one-on-one.
Any closing questions for Vicki at all? Well, thank you, and I appreciate all of you joining us tonight and hope that you gained some knowledge from this presentation. And like Vicki said, if you need any assistance, just let us know and we'll do what we can.
Thank you, Vicki. It was amazing.
Thank you guys for listening to me. And the next step you're going to do is call us and ask how to open Able accounts, I hope.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vicki. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vicki.